Okay, there we go. I'm going to go back to mute. So I think that I need your permission, Carrie, to unmute
Okay.
myself. So
Perfect. Well, everyone, welcome. Thank you for tuning in today. And we're talking about coping tools in the midst of a pandemic, something that's so very important for all of us right now. And especially anyone who's struggling with substance misuse patterns or is in early recovery or who has challenging relationships or a history of addiction or trauma or mental health challenges. And so all of the extra issues and difficulties and the world swimming in anxiety is going to be even more challenging for anyone who's got any of those additional pieces that they're managing through all of this. So welcome to just a really short exploration of coping tools and a little bit more understanding of how our nervous system is wired. And I love the fact that Avalon is doing so much to help support women right now through the programs that they're able to run online, the support networks that the center managers are offering to people. And so this is just one more thing to maybe help shape the way that we're going to cope with and get through this really difficult time, because everything's been impacted, right? Our capacity to connect with each other, our ability to get out and do the things that we would normally be doing. For many people, employment has been completely evaporated, their income has been affected, and there's a lot of anxiety around that. Our experience of shopping and needing to get groceries is difficult. Many people are in small homes with their whole family, and not being able to go about daily routines has been really impacted. So we're in the middle of a real significant upheaval. It is a time of disruption for all of us. And now more than ever, we actually need to have really healthy coping tools to get us through this. And so that's what we're going to be exploring today. Just a little bit of an idea of how our nervous system is wired, and a little bit of some basics in terms of understanding our nervous system so that we understand why certain coping tools work and why others don't. So welcome, and let me just introduce myself. My name is Carrie DeJong, and I'm a therapist. And I specialize primarily in working with trauma and addiction. And I'm also on the board for Avalon Recovery Society, which is why I love helping provide support for the women that we serve through Avalon. I'm a writer, and I am a self-confessed neuroscience geek. I love understanding how we're wired because it takes the guilt and shame away when we know that what's happening for us is completely normal in challenging times. And so I'm going to just launch a slideshow that I've got for us because it's going to walk us through some of these things. And so here we are. I love this picture because to me, it speaks a little bit of hope. And while we're in this place of challenge, it's such an important thing for every day. We need to be finding the places of light and beauty in our world. And that's a bit of what we're going to talk about today. Here I had said I'm a trauma and addiction therapist. And one of the things that I would say is I'm curious about why we struggle. It's mostly how our nervous system is wired, but I'm also way more curious about how we heal, how we move through things, and how we find the places of hope that still exist in our world, because these are the things that help us actually move through these difficult times. So today's info, what are we actually talking about today? We're going to be looking at neuroscience, which is how our brain is wired, the way that our nervous system, neurophysiology is our body. And so how our brain-body connection functions. Polyvagal theory is something that I absolutely am fascinated by, and I hope you will become a polyvagal geek with me through all of this. And it's this transformative way of understanding our nervous system that really helps us make sense of thoughts, feelings, behaviors, responses, instincts, and our connections with ourselves and other people. So that's a piece I'm really excited to bring today. I want to talk a lot about connection with ourselves, with each other, and with the things that help us cope during this time. These are important things to be remembering. And then just general coping tools and how we can move through this time a little bit better. So I want to introduce you to our brain. And our this model is based on the work of a man named Dr. Paul MacLean. And if I hold up my fist, this is sort of a model of the triune brain. This is the brainstem, the brainstem, the limbic system, and the cortex. And so if I hold up my hand and point, this is what I'm referring to. And so we have this idea of understanding our brain in a really transformative way that's super important because it helps, again, us understand why we do what we do sometimes and why we don't do things that we know we should be at sometimes. So let's walk through it. Brainstem, this part of our brain. This is the reptilian brain because it's about as much brain as a reptile has, and it's the part that controls all of our instincts. It's the part that controls the autonomic nervous system. That's what ANS stands for. It's the automatic parts of our whole body and brain that we never need to think about, like our circulatory system, breathing, our digestion. This is the part of our brain that launches our fight or flight response. And so when we experience fear or threat, this part launches into its behavior or instinctive responses with cortisol and adrenaline and our stress hormones. And it launches that way that we respond to threat. It's also the part of our brain that gives us bodily sensations. So when we get butterflies in our stomach, when we're anxious, when we feel like we want to punch something, when we're angry, when there is other sort of general sensations in our body that we associate with grief or sadness or joy. That's this part of our brain talking. And it's the oldest part of our brain, and it's online early in development in utero. It's completely formed by the end of the second trimester and even earlier. So our brain is wired to respond to threat really early on in life. Then we have our limbic system, so the thumb buried in this model. And it's the emotional brain, the mammalian brain, about as much brain as a mammal has. It's where we process emotion, where we have that idea that something is pleasurable and rewarding. I'm going to move towards it if it's exciting and pleasurable and I enjoy it. And if it's something that feels uncomfortable or it makes me feel fearful or I just have a revulsion to it, I'm going to stop doing that. It's also the smoke detector, or it houses the smoke detector, which is the part of our brain that first receives a threat response, which then goes back down into our brainstem to launch a fight or flight. It's where we store emotional memories, and it's the part of our brain that speaks to us in the language of emotion. This part is also very early on in our development. It's fully functional at birth. And it is fully functional, other than just a little bit of fine tuning in the first couple months of life. So these two parts are really long-standing, wired in survival tools for our brain. But then we get the next part, and we humans, our cortex often has a superiority complex. And so often we think that this part of our brain does most of the work. And in fact, it doesn't. This is what we think of when we think of our human brain: rational, logical, where we have good judgment. Maybe we experience a sense of connection to spirituality or our higher power. It's where we have the ability to do abstract reasoning, where we get creative and we're able to write poetry or paint or design something. Comes from that part of us, our brain. And this part of our brain speaks to us in the language of thought. And this is the slowest one to develop. And in fact, it's not fully developed till sometime in our mid to late 20s. It's even later for men. And we know that toddlers, for example, don't have this part of their brain wired in yet, which is why no one can reason with a toddler. If you've ever tried it, you know it doesn't work. This is also the reason why adolescents don't have a really good grasp on good judgment because their prefrontal cortex, which is here in their brain, isn't online yet. And so the piece that's really important to understand in all of this is that our senior partners, especially when we're experiencing stress, isn't our cortex. It's not the part of our brain that knows what it needs to do and does it, where we exercise good rational judgment, all of those things. It's these two parts, right? Where our limbic system in our brainstem is more activated, and it's going to do things that are really not always based on logical thought. And then we can judge ourselves mercilessly for doing something we know we shouldn't do or not doing something we know we should do. It's because these two parts of our brain, the lower two, the brainstem and the limbic system, are a bit more rattled, and it's calling the shots, which are about instinct. It's about survival. It's about coping. It's about feeling better than living and swimming in a sea of anxiety, which is what's going on around us right now. I love this quote from Dr. Paul MacLean. The limbic system, which rules emotions, can hijack higher mental functionings when it needs to. That's sometimes why when we're under stress, our thought patterns get a little jumbled and we're not always making the best decisions. So there's a little bit of an introduction to how our brain is wired. It's a really simplistic model because our brain is way more complex than that, but it helps give us a picture of something. So then I want to introduce you to the vagus nerve. Remember I told you that I am going to introduce you to the polyvagal theory? Well, it's based on the vagus nerve. And this diagram that's up on the screen is from a woodcut from the 1500s. It shows, it's not entirely anatomically correct, but it shows the amazing complexity of this nerve system. It comes out of our brain at the back here, and it wires all of our facial muscles, our voice box, our lungs, heart, bowel, bladder, spleen, all of the parts down there. And it's the longest and most complex nerve system in our entire body. And so what the heck does this vagus nerve? Vagus is short for, or sorry, it's Latin for wanderer, which is where we get the name from. What does this have to do with coping? And I'm going to say absolutely everything. And this is something that's so important to know and understand for all of us right now. So here's why. The vagus nerve has two really important jobs. It helps govern states of relaxation. So how are we actually going to be okay and cope with all of the stressors right now is our vagus nerve is involved. And our vagus nerve is also really key in helping us manage fear at this moment in time. And how does it do that? Well, let me tell you. So here is a diagram of the way our nervous system is wired. And we've got three circuits that the vagus nerve governs. And we're only in one of these circuits at a time. And when we are feeling connected and resourced and resourceful and healthy and coping well, we are able to live in that green social engagement zone where we have safe connection with ourselves and with others, where we feel calm and regulated, where there's a healthy balance in our system, and we're engaging in all of the things that help us manage our own physical bodily needs well. And as I said before, we feel resourced and resourceful. And we're able to stay in that green zone, and it feels manageable and life feels manageable. It doesn't mean that it's easy, but it means that it's manageable. And for the most part, I'm coping with this, and I can get through this with good connection and support around me. But for many people, that social engagement system, that circuit feels very unreachable in times when there's more stress going on in the world. It's disrupted our connections with each other and our usual support networks. And especially if anybody's got additional stressors that they're dealing with, they don't live in that top green zone very easily. And in fact, anyone with a history of trauma or substance use or addiction disorders has spent a lot of their lives in the bottom two. So the second circuit, we talk about are cues of threat or of danger. So when something's going on that feels overwhelming or stressful, scary, where we don't know the future, where we're needing to navigate things that are new and trying to figure out how to grocery shop in a new world, or how to connect on Zoom, or how to work remotely from home, or homeschool your children, or do anything that's new and different because of this pandemic, we're all going to be in states of mobilization more than we used to be. This is when we're experiencing those states of chronic stress or anxiety. It's when our nervous system launches into a fight or flight response, right? Remembering this part of our brain is now more active and it's responding in a fight or flight response. And it's going to lead to more conflict in relationships and more tension and more frustration and anxiety and irritability. And I know that that's happening in the homes of a lot of people right now, more than it ever has before, simply because we're in each other's spaces more. And our normal abilities to go and cope with things are very different. And so we're navigating all of that. And it's completely normal that we're feeling more mobilized and more anxious and more stressed out right now. And it's absolutely understandable. And so what happens when we stay in that mobilized state for too long? We actually then shut down and we move into that bottom circuit, the red one, and we move into a state where we feel more immobilized and more collapsed and more shut down, because our system doesn't cope very well with being in that middle mobilized state indefinitely. Eventually, we're going to just need to shut down. And our nervous system does that as a way of protecting us. And we often use unhealthy coping behaviors as a way of immobilizing and shutting down. And I heard a really, kind of concerning stat to me today that alcohol use among certain age groups in the last few weeks has skyrocketed. And people are wanting to just numb out to get through this anxious period with a pandemic and all of the stressors that it brings. This is also when people are going to use Netflix and gaming and just excessive sleeping and anything to not feel anymore. And this is when we start feeling more hopeless and despair, and where we just want to give up on things and it doesn't matter anyways. And for anyone that's had a history of depression or self-harming thoughts or suicidality, this circuit, this bottom one, is where those thoughts and feelings and behaviors show up. So we start to understand how worrisome it is if we live in those bottom two. It's understandable that we go there, but for many people, there's a risk of staying there and staying stuck. And now more than ever, we need to figure out, how do we find a way of living up here in that social engagement connection, where it feels okay in my body, where it feels manageable in my connections with some people, maybe not everyone, but enough connection and enough ability to regulate my own physical body. So how do we do that? Good question, right? Because that's what we're really wanting to talk about today, is what are the tools for managing all of this? So let's talk a little bit about that. Oh, no, sorry, I was gonna actually review these three in a bit of a different way. So our social engagement system, the green zone, this is the things that I've already mentioned: connection, safety, emotion, communication. Co-regulation is the way that we provide support for each other through this. Really, really key thing to remember, that we need to be helped and supported by other people, but we can also learn more ways to do that for ourselves. It's about regulating our whole nervous system and our body and emotions and brain in ways. And it's also about cooperation. So that's what that green zone invites us into. But then if we have the function of the mobilization circuit, this protects us through movement, fight or flight, where we've got cortisol and adrenaline and Sometimes people might find that they're staying really, really super busy, finding anything that they can do rather than slowing down and resting, because their system doesn't like to slow down very much. Maybe that's something you know about yourself. And it might be because your your experience of life hasn't shown you how to enjoy safe rest where it feels restorative and healthy. And maybe one of the things that you're doing is just keeping super busy to keep yourself out of that bottom zone where you shut down. And that's an important pattern to realize, right? This is when we're in a mobilized state, we're actually picking up cues of danger and lack of safety. And we have a tendency to misread cues when we're in this middle circuit. This is an interesting thing to know about ourselves, is that we're more likely to take something that is neutral. It's not good or bad, right or wrong, but we're likely to interpret it as a danger signal. And so the tone of voice of a loved one might actually be neutral, but when we're in this middle zone, we might hear that they're mad or they're angry or they're irritable with us, and feel threatened that way. And the thing that's important to know about being mobilized is when we're here, we actually sacrifice connection with each other to stay in this fight or flight, or when we are in this fight or flight response. So it's some things to think about there. And then we have what's the function of immobilization. And I also want to mention all of these are survival tools. And our nervous system has the capacity to move into all of these circuits for safety reasons and for survival reasons. And they're not wrong to go there. The hard part for many of us is that we get stuck in these bottom two. And what we continue to try to do is figure out, how do we get to that one at the top, that green zone? And, often for people that have had a history of trauma or substance misuse or addiction, they might not have a lot of experience with that green zone. And so it can be a double whammy. It's hard to get there because you've not had a lot of experiences with it. And you're trying to do that in a pandemic. That's a lot. But getting back to the function of the mobilization, it's responsible for protecting us by shutting down and collapsing. It's the freeze response that we sometimes lose the ability to respond. We're not able to fight or flee, so we shut down. And there's different experiences that happen. It can feel dissociative or numb. It can be despair or hopelessness or depression. It can be that sense of just shutting down and not feeling, not knowing, almost a sense of not being. We become disconnected from ourselves in a profound way. It can also be things like real fatigue or confusion right now, or excessive sleeping that's happening for people, or just spending hours and hours playing games or on Netflix or doing mindless tasks and staying up really late till we're kind of in a zombie state, and then trying to sleep and sleep in during the day. So those are patterns of immobilization. And I think the polyvagal theory really talks a lot about how important safe relationships are. And we're wired for connection. And it's actually crucial for our health and our mental health and our emotional health to have moments when we can connect and feel seen and feel connected with people around us. It builds a capacity to love. It helps us deal with stress, helps our bodies be more regulated, and it allows us to actually experience emotions, positive emotions, in a different way. So how do we apply the polyvagal theory to coping and self-care right now? And so the first order of the day is to consider how we are taking care of our body. Remember, the vagus nerve innervates all of this, and it's really an important thing to be paying attention to how we're taking care of our body. Are we getting regular sleep? And is it a sleep pattern that's manageable? And as I said, not staying up really late and sleeping in. Our natural circadian rhythm is more aligned with, getting to bed before midnight and waking up before 8 is really an ideal way of looking at it. Getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep are considered, within the range of a healthy sleep pattern. A healthy diet is really important, and one that we're, eating regularly and nutritiously, drinking water, being hydrated, moving our bodies in ways that are healthy and comfortable and not over exercising. So things like yoga and Pilates or going for a walk. Maybe you're somebody that's had experience with breathing exercises and you might want to revisit those because they help regulate our brainstem and help us feel more settled and grounded. And now's the time, even though the world isn't seeing us, now's the time that we still need to stay engaged in our hygiene routines. We need to brush our teeth. We need to have showers. We need to take care of our physical bodies in those ways and not wear the same clothes for, 10 days at a time, because it's really easy to do that. And it's that taking care of these things and having some kind of normal routine in our lives. So what are some more coping tools? Let's talk about them. The really simple aspect of grounding. Grounding is a way that we just feel more present in our body, where we notice sensations, where we maybe feel where it feels comfortable in our own body. And I'm going to invite us, let's just practice it for a moment. And if it's all right with you, take in a moment just to feel the chair underneath your legs. Can you notice what it feels like to just bring your awareness to where the couch or the chair is meeting your back? And can you notice that it's holding you up? And maybe notice what happens to the energy in your body when you do that. Hopefully it settles a little bit. Or if it feels okay to experiment, maybe following your breath, just taking a little moment to help your nervous system settle by following your breath, which just simply means noticing what it feels like to breathe. You don't have to count, you don't have to hold your breath. Just breathe normally and notice what it feels like. Can you notice the sensations of inhale and that they feel different than exhale? Can you track your breath and notice what it feels like as your chest expands just a little bit? And again, just noticing what happens to your body, what happens to your energy as you do that. So those are a couple of simple tools for grounding. There's also ways of doing it the way that we connect with the earth or the ground underneath us. And if it's okay with you, even just bringing your attention to where your feet have contact with the floor. Can you feel it under your feet? Can you notice if your feet are warm or cold, or what the texture is underneath them? Can you notice the effects of gravity that it's holding us into a chair? Maybe even allowing ourselves, our body to relax just a little bit. These are simple grounding tools that we can practice any time of the day. And we can have these little mini moments where we're up in a green zone. Even though there's a lot of challenges going on around us, these help us find a way back into that green zone, which is really important amongst all of the places of challenge. And even if it's a millisecond or two, it's still a millisecond or two where our system can have a little bit more connection with itself. So what are more grounding tools? Let me introduce you a couple of favorite ones of mine. And this is one that I love. It's called the butterfly hug. And it's just simply, and I'm going to warn, some of you will like this and some of you won't. And grounding tools are really personal. So you have to find what helps your nervous system and where it feels like it's a yes, as opposed to something that you just go, "Ooh, I hate that." Don't do it if you don't like it. But it's always that curiosity of what helps your nervous system relax or feel just a little bit more supported. And so sometimes when we're feeling really anxious, when our heart is pounding, when it feels like that anxiety is getting really bad, this can provide just a little bit of support where we hold our hands like this and we just gently tap, right? Our bodies love rhythm. They love that consistent tapping feeling. And if that doesn't feel comfortable for you, you could try moving it to your arms and doing it this way. And so just seeing if that's something that helps your system feel just slightly more connected with yourself. There's another really important tool called orienting to sights and sounds. And remember, when we're moved into those middle, the middle or the bottom one, it's because we're picking up cues of danger or threat, whether it's from the world, from our social media feed, from something going on in our home, something going on in our own physical body. When we start feeling anxiety, we're not feeling safe anymore. And so it can be really helpful, really beneficial to take a moment to just orient to sights and sounds that feel comforting. And so I invite you, if it feels okay, even just pausing for a moment and just looking around your room slowly, kind of noticing what's there, finding something that you like to look at, and just notice what that feels like. Or pausing to listen to sounds. Maybe it's quiet, or maybe there are comforting sounds you can listen to, right? Those are these momentary times. If you're finding it hard to sleep because anxiety is impacting your feeling safe and able to fall asleep, before you tuck into bed, it might be just really important to practice a little bit of grounding by orienting to what helps you feel safe. I'm in my bed, it's comfortable, it's cozy, I've got these blankets around me. I can see what's comfortable and provides me with a sense of comfort in my room. It's a good practice for to try. Maybe some of these are going to work for you and some of them might not, but it's always good to be curious what helps. Then some of you might have been introduced to the 5-4-3-2-1, and there's a lot of different ways that this can look, but it's simply like 5 things you see. Look around the room and identify 5 things that you can pick. Or maybe it's 5 colors, 5 different green things or 5 different black things. It doesn't really matter. Can you hear 4 different things? Can you feel 4 things? Can you hear 3 things? Can you smell something? Can you taste something? This just helps us orient to our own senses, our sensory systems. So when we talk about more grounding tools, we want to find things that just help activate our vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve in our social engagement network really benefits from doing things like eating something crunchy. Potato chips might be good, but carrot sticks are a great option too, or celery or pretzels or something that just feels like we got to get these muscles, our vagus nerve muscles, activated up here. Make yourself a cup of herbal tea or sit in the sun with your herbal tea. Maybe taking a moment to just think about 3 things you are grateful for. In the middle of all of these challenging things, what is the sources of light and hope that you can find every day? That there's still trees that are blooming and in bud, and there's daffodils, and there are people doing kind things, and we can find those moments around us and they can help shift us. Maybe take a warm bath or take care of plants or your garden. And sometimes it can just feel really grounding to do a simple, repetitive, mundane chore. Our house can be a mess and we could be feeling really shut down, but even if we do one thing, like wash half the dishes, it just starts helping us connect to things that keep us a little bit more grounded. I also want to outline some really specific social engagement tools. So these are the pieces that anchor us up top. And it's when we have a good laugh. There's no wonder that people in the midst of this really significant disruption and anxiety-provoking time, the funny things people are doing have increased, right? We've always had, funny memes and funny videos, but that's one of the things I've noticed a lot more is people are trying to engage in just fun laughter. And that is a valuable way that we feel better. When we play with our kids, play with our dog, play, a game online with people, do video challenges. I don't even know, but something that's just fun. Sing, put a good record on and belt it out at the top of your lungs, things like that. Connecting with supportive people, whether it be through Avalon services or any other mental health services that are available. Be creative, create something. Draw, write, paint, bake, cook. There's so many different things that we can do and stay engaged with our family and friends. There's also a few other pieces that I want to remind you that our doctors want us still to connect with them if we feel like at this point in time, mental health issues are getting more challenging, if you're experiencing anxiety or depression or thoughts of self-harming more, this now is a really important time to connect with your doctor. And they're not as busy. And I've heard this from several doctors. The people that are on the front lines dealing with the COVID pandemic, yes, but most doctors have got systems in place for doing consults, whether it be through the TELUS app, Babylon Health, or different things. Our doctors want us to check in with them if we're experiencing more challenges around mental health and those pieces that are really kind of can get big if we're isolated and alone and struggling more at this point in time. We can seek online support, and Avalon is a great resource for ways that you, if you need support, peer-to-peer support, if you're needing, a meeting or just tools or different ways to reach out into the community, they're there to help. Maybe it's a time to set boundaries with people that, around how much time you're giving to certain people or what it is that you feel like you're doing. It can be important to have self-care and set boundaries for that right now. It can be a really important thing to write a little list of 3 or 5 or 10 things that help you at this point in time, even if it's just for a minute, that your nervous system feels a little bit more like it can go up here or move somewhat up that ladder. It's important that we remind ourselves what those things are. And the 1% rule is one of my favorite tools because when we're feeling really shut down, it can be hard to think about cleaning our entire house or that list that we kept saying we should get to. And so, or the book that we should get to. And so what would it be like to just say, okay, I haven't been getting to those things, but I'm going to read one page from that book just to get started. Or I'm going to clean out one drawer or one shelf, or I'm going to put away one thing today. I'm going to go for a 2-minute walk instead of the 10,000 steps that I should be getting every day. It doesn't matter how we should ourselves. The 1% rule sometimes helps us just take small steps that we can then maybe do again the next day. And so there you have it. I have shared some things that I think are real. I'm just going to stop sharing for now and come back. And what I wanted to do was just encourage you to find one of these tools that resonates with you today, and that maybe you have a chance to practice it, to try it, to be curious about what else is there, to reach out for support, and to try some things that might help your nervous system have more support and feel more regulated. So I have finished with the pieces that I wanted to share today. So I wanted to invite you, if any of you have questions, Caitlin might come on and share them with me. You can type them in the chat part of the section. If there's something that you're wondering about or that you'd like me to clarify, feel free. So anyone can ask questions if they want. So let me, before we have any questions, there's one piece that I wanted to double back on. And there is a real struggle for some people who stay in that middle zone. That highly mobilized state is home for a lot of people. And for people that live in that middle mobilized state, some of what's challenging is that when you slow down, it feels like you're moving into collapse, as opposed to a safe rest, which isn't down here. It's actually something different. I'll go into that maybe at a different point in time. But what I will say is that safe rest, where it's restorative and healing for people who've experienced shavasana, or that ability to sit in the sun and read a book and your nervous system just goes, ah, thank you, right? Where there's that sense of rest and digest, and that good rest where we're able to fall asleep and it feels comfortable. That safe rest is different than the unhealthy rest that this collapse piece is. And sometimes people stay in this middle zone because it feels like slowing down brings you to this one, as opposed to that safe rest experience. And so even sometimes having awareness of that is really important to have clarity around, that maybe that might be one of the things that's happening if you're finding it difficult to slow down at this point in time. It might be figuring out how to practice little moments where it feels like you can have that breath that's resting. So any questions or comments?
I just wanted to leap in, Carrie, just looking back to your previous slide, you had mentioned about healthy boundaries. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that we've actually posted something, I think it's gone out already today. So we posted something about social self-care and how to set healthy boundaries. So that's a blog that's on our website right now. And it's actually a precursor to a workshop that we'll be hosting as part of our self-care workshop series. So that's on April 25th, and that's completely free, 2:00. It's got all the links in there. So yeah, if anybody wants to check that out, that'll be on there as well. And then, yeah, I think I had a quick question for you. I know we've kind of chatted about this before, but maybe you could share some of the things that you've been doing in your life to kind of regulate and help yourself get through this as well.
Well, it's interesting. And people often say, well, are you anxious? Of course I am. This is hard for all of us. And there's times when all of this disruption has been hard for anyone, including myself. And so how am I getting through it is a really good question. And I'm planting things, and I'm in my garden. And I make it a point every day to get outside, and I'm going for a long walk. And one of the pieces that I've added to my daily walk is finding the light. It's an invitation that I've put out for myself. Just, how am I going to find something of beauty on my walk today? And I take a picture of it, just to remind me that this is something I need to be looking for every day. I'm baking more, and I'm baking to give things away to people. And I had a group of families that I'm in contact with. And one of the really fun things I did was I just, and I will continue over the next few months, or however long we're in this, is just doing video challenges. So get everybody on a call, and I invited them, the first thing I invited them to do was submit to me an awkward family portrait, and then had judges, and the winner got something really fun. And so there's just ways that we can stay involved and creative and doing things that help us stay in that green zone. I'm really working hard to get good sleep as well. And, there's this piece of, we've all had the opportunity to slow down a little bit because our lives have been crazy, and we need to be okay with resting when we need to rest. So that's one of the pieces I'm giving myself permission to do.
That's great. And we do have a question. So the question is, I was curious why vigorous exercise wasn't in there. You'd mentioned gentle exercise. Is vigorous exercise not good for you?
I should clarify, no, that wasn't intentional on my part. Vigorous exercise is important. I think I was more saying that sometimes if we're in a real shutdown place, we can try just even doing gentle exercise like yoga or Pilates or walking, if going for a run or doing an aerobic class is hard. But for people that are able to do that, that's fantastic. Exercise is important. So yeah, sorry if I miscommunicated that one.
Excellent. That's great. I think that's all the questions that we had. Some feedback that we love the awkward family photo challenge. So that is
There's
a
a lot of
great
great
idea.
awkward family photos
Oh yeah.
on the internet. And so all I did was I posted a few pictures and I said, submit your own awkward family photo. Oh, it was great.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I think we might have to steal that.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for this, Carrie. This was great. And as I mentioned, so we've been recording. So after this is finished up, I will be posting this on our website. We're going to do a little bit of a blog post recap as well. So that'll be on our website by Friday. So if anybody wants to view this again, go through it, or share it with anybody else, it'll be live on Friday.
Great. Thanks for doing that, Caitlin.
No worries. Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thanks everyone for jumping on this one, and yeah, stay connected to yourself and each other through all of this, and that is really what's going to help us get through this. So thanks, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, Carrie.